Hey everyone, I'm Rachel. I have hamsters, and today is a long overview video of little Oscar and his adventures with me thus far, what it was like to get him from the LA County shelters, and yeah, just how I worked with him. He's a really skittish Robo. I know when I read on Facebook groups and Reddit, a lot of people are asking about how to deal with Robos who are really nervous and how do you get through to them? How do you even get them out of their cage so you can do some cleaning? These are real problems. So I'll talk about how I worked with him and how it's going so far. So this is Oscar's 100 quart bin cage that I set up for him pretty last minute. If you watched my video, which I will link to above and below, I got him without a lot of pre-planning. He was on the red list at the Baldwin LA County Park Shelter in late December of 2021. And at the time I already had 4 hamsters, but I figured, well, what's one more? I love Robos, and it breaks my heart to think that a Robo would need to be euthanized for no good reason. He just looked too cute to pass up. So I swooped in and got him. He wasn't even technically listed as available. I had to sort of pull some strings to let them even let me take him home. And then I got him home and I had to quickly set up this bin cage for him. I had the materials, but it was sort of last minute, so I know it's not a ton of burrowing space, but it's what I had in the moment, and he only lived in this for a couple weeks until I got him a better setup going. So a little bit about Oscar. Like every hamster, he has a really unique personality that is really different than my other hamsters. And one thing I realized pretty quickly with him is that he is extremely skittish. I had to be very careful just even to be able to see him, to take these videos was pretty difficult. I think it helped that his cage wasn't very big at this time and there wasn't a lot of burrowing space. But yeah, I really had to work at seeing him at all, and interacting with him was very minimal. Of course, this is when I first got him, so I tried not to interact with him too much and just sort of observe him, make sure he was using the cage effectively, that there wasn't anywhere that he couldn't access or he was getting stuck. Sometimes when you build cage setups, and if you're new to the hamstering world, you will realize this, especially with Robos and Dwarves. They're really clumsy little creatures, and sometimes you think oh, they can climb up this, but then you watch them and they can, or they get stuck, or So I do think it's really important to watch them and observe them and listen to them and get to know them and what they like. So that's really what I did, is I just sort of sat back and very carefully watched him. I tried not to make any sounds whatsoever. Just tried to provide him with a lot of enrichments, a lot of different types of foods and toys and chews, just things that he probably didn't have access to before, and see how he did. Yeah, one thing about him is I didn't know how old he is, or he was at the time, and I didn't really know anything about his situation. He was listed as a stray at the Baldwin County Park Shelter, and I don't really know what that means. Usually stray means that they're found wandering along the side of the road, but did they really find this tiny hamster somewhere in LA? I don't know. So it seems unlikely that someone would find him and be able to catch him. So I'm going to assume that maybe an owner surrendered, or he was just dropped off, maybe abandoned at the shelter without paperwork, and that's why he was listed as a stray. I don't know how long he lived with another person, or maybe he was very young, kind of a baby when we got him. I really have no idea. I kind of assumed that he was very young just because he looked young, but he also maybe wasn't very well cared for, and maybe he just didn't have as much food access or good food access. So he definitely grows a lot in the next few months, as you'll see in some videos. He becomes my largest Robo, and And in the end, my largest hamster, which is kind of crazy. I think at his highest weight, he was 59 grams, which I know sounds crazy. And I brought him to the vet and they were like, he's healthy, he looks good, he's just a really big boy. And that is definitely him. He's a big, squishy little guy. And so, you know, I don't know if his growth spurt after he came into my care was because he didn't have proper care before or because he was young. Anyway, we did eventually get him across the country to Michigan, where my parents live. And these are all 5 of my hamsters. They each had their own 200-quart bin cage set up once I got them to Michigan. It was quite the ordeal, and I will have to do a video about traveling with your hamster. I did try to capture the moments, but I will say it was pretty stressful, and I spent a lot of my time just making sure everyone was happy and healthy, so I didn't get a lot of footage. But this is Oscar's bin right here, and you can kind of see him hiding under there, doing whatever he can to avoid any human contact. But this is kind of the setup, and you've seen this setup in Steven's cage or maybe some of my other hamster videos that I've done for a lot of my 200-quart bin cages. I'll have a lower platform and a higher platform, sometimes a multi-chamber multi-chamber with stilts, and then the 12-inch platform on one side, and then a long bendy bridge. I give them a sand bath, a good wheel, and lots of sprays, which it quickly became apparent that Oscar was a big fan of foraging, and he was just, oh, so cute watching him eat little flax sprays all the time. I love the way he runs away at the end. Just watch this. There he goes. Yeah, so he was quite a little skittish guy. We had a lot of standoffs of me very patiently waiting for him to maybe come out at some point and show his tiny but very adorable little face. I mean, I think the thing about Robos, and if you haven't had a Robo before, yeah, they can be skittish and they can be a little harder to bond with, but when you get to see them, it's like a magical little fairy. They're so cute. They're just like, oh, look, there they are. A little glimpse. It gets very exciting. I quickly realized that Oscar loves having his own grass, and that was a good way to lure him out. So in addition to sprays, I would grow cat grass for him, and I'm going to do a video about that soon. I'm actually almost done with it. So if you're interested in growing grass for your hamsters, I highly recommend it. One thing I also really like to do is feed my hamsters fresh veggies on a frequent basis. Honestly, most days if I have something, I give it to them. So often I'm sort of peeling it off of whatever I'm eating for dinner that night. So if I have a salad, I give them a little piece of lettuce and a little piece of cucumber. If I have an apple, I give them a little piece of apple. And it's kind of nice because it keeps them part of your life, in addition to providing this new and enriching experience for them where they get to try new flavors, and it's healthy, and it also gives them a reason to kind of come out and maybe show themselves to you if you have a very skittish hamster. So I did use bribing techniques like shelled peanuts and pieces of cucumber to try to get Oscar to show his little adorable bod to me. Yeah, and it mostly worked. One of the problems I ran into, and I see people ask about this, is how do you get them out of your cage? How do you get them out of their cage so you can bring them to a playpen, so you can do cleaning, so you can bond with them? If they're really skittish, that is really hard. And I know some people say, like, well, I have a watch-only hamster. I understand that theory, but I think it's important to try to establish some trust between you and your hamster so that when it comes time for a vet visit, it's a little bit easier. So one thing I know a lot of people struggle with skittish Robos is, how do you get them out of their cage? How do you bond with them if they won't even go in a cup, if you can't get them to, get anywhere close to you? So what I like to do is I like to use these plastic clear cups, and I leave them in their cages and just let the hamster get comfortable with it. Let them explore it like Oscar is here. So he doesn't see it as a scary thing, although he does run off when my hand approaches. At least it's something he knows. One thing I found with him is that actually this clear tunnel here worked really well with capturing him because he felt pretty safe in it. I think it was a little bit smaller than the cup. And with time, he started going in that tunnel, and then I could kind of trap him in the tunnel as a way to get him out of his cage and into a playpen and a situation where I could bond with him and work with him a little more. So you'll see here, he will willingly jump into this tube, and then I just have to very carefully stop it at both ends. And then I got him to go to a playpen, which was great. I think playpen time is a wonderful way to get your hamster acclimated to a bigger world, to sort of expand their vocabulary. They seem to grow a lot from that experience. And even if you're not really interacting with them in the playpen, I think just getting them out of their element seems to do them a lot of good. And this is what I did with Oscar. It definitely took some time. I would say be patient. It maybe took me weeks of practicing trying to get him in a cup. And even at that, once I got him to the playpen, sometimes it was really hard for me to get him to go back in the cup and get him to go home. But now he's totally cup trained. When I see him awake and I offer him the cup, he either goes in it or he doesn't. But he knows what it means, and he is happy to go back in the cup after being in the playpen. It's really easy to get him to go back home. So it just takes a little time and consistency. And having a hamster cam is really great for that because you can see when your skittish hamster is awake, and you can go very gently approach them with that cup. Whereas if you don't have a cam notifying you that your hamster's awake, it's really hard to make any progress. Okay, small aside here, but that was quite the tumble from Oscar. You can see he's a little stunned by it, but he's okay. You know, I do hear people ask about their Robos and they're flipping on their wheels. Honestly, I think young hamsters, they just have trouble sometimes getting acclimated to a wheel, and it takes them some time. Or a hamster who hasn't had a good wheel, it does take them some time to learn how to use it, and just be patient and don't get overly freaked out. They will be okay. Just make sure their wheel is in a safe spot and they won't fly off and fall. So back to what we're talking about. So here's Oscar in the playpen that I had set up. I really like to have a playpen constantly set up all the time for my hamsters rather than using like a temporary space like a bathtub or a bathroom. What I love about playpens is I can set them up and just kind of let them explore. I don't have to over monitor them. I mean, I do often sit there and observe, but I don't have to worry. And it also becomes a familiar place to them. So for Oscar, who's a skittish hamster, he starts to remember the playpen. He makes sense there. Sometimes he might even go take a nap in a hide or something. And so it's helpful, I think, with new hamsters in particular, to have a space that's really consistent so they can learn the space and be a little bit less freaked out when they do venture outside of their enclosure to see the greater world. And what do I keep in my playpens? So that is a little bit of coconut fiber, and I've sprinkled some dried flowers in there and some seed mix for him to find. So you can see my hamsters usually love that, and they go to town digging. I have lots of seed sprays all over. Lots of things to hide under. I love those coffee containers that you get from Starbucks. They make great hides for hamsters. I love using them in their bins, and also just you can kind of put them anywhere. They are good to climb on. They're also lightweight, so you don't have to worry about your hamster injuring themselves or falling, or getting under it and getting stuck. It's a really great, handy little tool. And then again, I also have those pumice stones. I have mixed feelings about them, but they do make good stepping stones if you're trying to let your hamster climb into something. That's often what I use them for. I also have a collection now of rocks that I've gathered as stepping stones, but those work great. They're very easy for them to hold on to and lightweight. And sometimes they nibble on them a little bit, but for the most part, they kind of just leave them alone. So I think I don't really have any worries about safety with those. So you can see there, he didn't really need those stepping stones. Oscar is probably one of my more athletic hamsters. He's fairly good at jumping up on things. I mean, within reason. I would say like Steven and Sophia, my other two Robos that I've had thus far, are a little bit less good. Sometimes Sophia could climb things very carefully, but usually she needed a little boost. And my dwarf hamsters, Laverne and Shirley, also were not great climbers. I actually think they were worse. So he's a little bit of an athletic guy, so he doesn't need those stepping stools as much. But as your hamsters get older, and every hamster is different, so I just like to make sure everything is accessible. And again, as I said, if you're kind of new to Robos, Oscar is a Roborovski hamster, and he's enormous. It's hard to tell maybe from this video, but he's about 50, he's somewhere usually between 55 and 59 grams, which is like huge. He basically, at a lot of the points of his life, was larger than even my dwarf hamsters, Laverne and Shirley, and was just like overall a big hamster. When I compare him to Sophia, one of my other Robo hamsters, she was about 20 to 25 grams. She was just like a tiny little blip, and this guy just like this giant hamster, but so cute. And again, like I said, I mean, I did bring him to the vet, and I was like, I am careful about what I feed him. I don't, I know you can see he has access to the sunflower head here, but it's limited. I didn't give him unlimited seeds. I think I tried to give him a balanced diet and veggies and protein and mealworms and all those good things. So, I mean, I think I think this is just testament that hamsters come in all sorts of shapes and sizes with all sorts of personalities, and you just never know what you're going to get. And maybe you'll get a giant Robo too. But you do have to kind of adjust to them. Oscar is so big that I upgraded his wheel to a 12-inch wheel because he's just enormous. He also has a 10-inch wheel that he uses too. And I feel good about both of those wheels, but I definitely would not put him on anything smaller than a 10-inch because of his size. He's just too big for that, and he runs too hard, and he tends to do better on a wheel that is bigger because he has fewer accidents and fewer flipping incidences. So if you are having an issue with that with your hamster, I would suggest upgrading them to a bigger wheel. Upgrade them until they stop, because I think a sign of them when they have a wheel that's too small, they're going too fast on it, that usually results in them flipping off of it. So if they have a nice big wheel, then they'll probably flip a little less and be a little safer in there, and also just be happier and comfortable. So right now, Oscar's playing with this DIY porta breaker that I made. I actually have a video about them, so I can link it above. You'll want to use oat flour for this, because if you use regular flour, there's a risk of foodborne illness that you can pass to your hamsters. But oat flour is highly heated in its processing, so it's a little safer. And other things I keep in the playpen, honestly, whatever I can find that might entertain them. Lots of tunnels and hides, things to smell and eat, a little sand bath. You'll see in a bit that there's a clear spinning like running disc. I know people have very strong feelings about these. My hamsters seem to really enjoy them, and they don't use them for a long time. It's not like they're in the playpen for hours. They'll, sometimes run for a minute on it. Laverne, one of my dwarf hamsters, used to use it because it's kind of loud, and so she would run on it because it made noise, and then she knew that it would make us sit up and listen to her, and then she'd stand there and wait for us to come either get her or give her a treat or something. So your hamster might use it in some way, but I just don't feel like it's a big enough risk that it's worth over fretting about. I wouldn't probably keep it in your hamster's cage all the time, because they can curve their back while they're running, and it might be unhealthy for them. But for a few minutes, I don't see how it's any different than just regular moving around and exploring. All right, so that's about all I have to say about getting to know little Oscar. It's been a joy to see him come out of his shell a bit and explore and enjoy being in the playpen. He is one of those hamsters who just has never become a cuddly hamster, unlike Steven or Sophia, who would really enjoy a good back massage once in a while. Oscar has remained mostly kind of a hamster who likes to do his own thing, but I have made great progress with him. He now knows how and knows about the cup and will come and go with it. He's comfortable being in a playpen. It's a lot easier to get him to the vet after spending all this time sort of acclimating him. And he's just so cute and beautiful. I mean, I wouldn't trade him for the world. So I want to encourage any of you who have a skittish hamster or are new to Roborovskis to just be patient, take your time, and love who they are. You know, if you want a hamster who's super cuddly, I do suggest that you go to a rescue and ask for a hamster who is very cuddly, because rescues, they're working with the hamsters and they'll know which hamsters are going to want a lot of human interaction. But if you're open to it, you know what? There's, I think, room for all types of hamsters in your life, and I'm really glad that I have little Oscar. So thank you so much for watching today. If you have any questions or thoughts or comments, leave them for me below. I will put a list of everything in his cage and in the playpen down below in case you want to find it. And yeah, I hope to see you in my next video. Thanks.